This is Mandatory Listening. I'm your host, Kent Mann. Each week, we sit down over a cup of coffee and discuss interesting topics in the world of the customer experience. Welcome back to Mandatory Listening. This is your host, Kent Mann, and I'm joined today by a long-lost guest. Hello, Uriah.
Hello. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we had you back. If you recall from Season 1, I think we've had quite a few listeners add since Season 1, but we've got an old friend with us. So Uriah works at our local butcher shop in Asheville, and he has become one of our best friends when we're looking for meat. So how you doing today, Uriah?
I'm doing really well. Looking forward to the podcast. It's great to be back.
Yep.
Had a blast last time and felt like we got on a lot of good topics, but looking forward to see what we can talk to today.
Yeah, we had a good dynamic on the last one. It's weird how our market, the specialty retail market, fits right in with the meat department. So,
I kind of consider the butcher shop specialty retail just in the sense of the products that we carry at this particular butcher shop. I mean, it is kind of higher end, nicer things meant to be, definitely not an everyday meal. We like to say less meat, better meat. As a way to look at the world and a way to treat our kind of boutique product.
Definitely. Well, elaborate that a little bit. Like, what do you mean by just refined?
Well, I mean, you walk into our butcher shop and if you think, what's for dinner? If you've never been in before, everyone shops at typical grocery stores and you might find things that cost, $6, $7, $8 a pound. These same products in our shop might cost upwards of $40 a pound. And that's just because of the nature of what we do, really emphasize locality and to us paying the farmer and paying the gentleman that drops off. The product to us is really, really important and we kind of extrapolate that through the cost. And also being such a nice specialty retail place with higher end customer service, we have to pay our customer sales, people really, really well to get them to do the job that we expect them to do. To make sure that the service is given correctly. Well,
that's a good way of putting it. I think that not only are your customers paying for a higher end quality product, whether it be local or grass fed or higher quality, just not factory farmed. Mm-hmm. Meat can sometimes just be the selling point for people, but also you're paying the farmer a higher wage than normal. You're paying your employees a higher wage than normal. And so the owners are walking away with less than they could.
Absolutely.
In theory, of course.
Yeah, you could squeeze any business for pennies, and you can really pinch, and you could be awful to your employees and charge them for things like staff meals, or you can really be harsh on things like if a product gets damaged. But to me, to really hold on to good people, you have to A, pay them well, and B, treat them well. I mean, Oftentimes the second one's more important depending on the person. They say, wage and respect are two large things that people need from a business. So if you don't, you can pay anybody really, really well, but if you don't treat them correctly, oftentimes they won't stick with your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we thought about doing this podcast in the first place was, I come into the shop basically weekly, maybe every other week. You've recently renovated the shop. So you've added a menu, you've moved some of the counters around, and just opened the store up a little bit more. So talk about your involvement in the renovations, or what if you just heard it through hearsay, what was the rationale behind it, and what were some of the complications?
So at the time that we renovated, the business was 8 years old. Mm-hmm. It had been under several different owners. And just to take a step back, when we look at any business, they say that a business's sales, a business's potential plateaus after 5 years. You've kind of reached you've reached your carrying capacity, so to say. A renovation, an expansion, a remodel, a rebrand can extend that lifetime. Mm-hmm. So we had already kind of exceeded and overstepped what they considered the average, that 5-year mark at the 8-year mark. So by renovating, the owners thought that they could buy themselves a few more years, or at least interest a few more people. We always would have the question, speaking to the menu, of people coming into the butcher shop and asking if they could have a meal or a sandwich. So we kind of checked that off the list. Moving things around kind of opened the space up and allowed us to better utilize the same square footage and just, to cater to more customers in a different way. And then lastly, customer service is such a key part of our business because we like to joke, we did not reinvent the wheel. People have been cutting meat for thousands of years, but to us, customer service is what sets us apart, and that's what's so important. And so by renovating, we allowed ourselves a little bit more room and a better flow, so to say, just to heighten that customer service experience.
Yeah, how did you sit down or how did they or you or everyone involved sit down and say, okay, well, we're going to renovate. What do we need to renovate? Do we just start moving stuff around until it fits? or were we tactical? All right, we have to decide we're not going to have a full service menu. We're just going to have appetizers, or we're just going to have sandwiches, or you have to be kind of tactical with things like this. So what was the rationale behind yours?
The very first step was a floor plan that was drawn by the owner. This gentleman gets up at 4 a.m. every day, and that's when his day starts, and he's 100 miles an hour from there. And I believe he was having his morning coffee and had a blank piece of printer paper in front of him and began sketching. And he brought this floor plan into a few of the higher ups in the company, and we started all looking at it. We're like, whoa, this is really, really nice. Like, how can we heighten this? How can we actually put this into use? And the first thing that got thrown out was, of course, the menu to cater to those customers that we always had to turn away.
Yep.
It'd be like having a product constantly be asked for and everyone wants it, and then you just wouldn't bring it in. That doesn't make any sense. You have to cater to these people. That's your revenue right there walking out the door. And then we took a look at some of the problems we'd had in the past with people not being comfortable going to certain parts of our space because of the way that things were set up. They felt as if they were off limits areas that we actually wanted them to go to. So by opening up the floor plan, we actually allowed people to kind of access all of our areas.
Yeah, I noticed that it was like the one of the freezers was behind the charcuterie area, like the deli area. So now that's become a more welcoming area to go. And there was a good amount of square footage there that I think people were nervous to walk behind. So that's an interesting dynamic that you guys are like, oh yeah, of course you can go back there. Like, of course, go look but the subconscious of the customer is like, I don't think I should go back there.
Absolutely. I mean, we'd done everything but put an arrow and a sign on the floor that said, please go back here. To try to invite people back there. I mean, we painted, we hung signs. I mean, it was just the dynamic and the way that things were scrunched together. So by, again, remodeling and moving things around, we were able to kind of heighten the customer service experience again.
Yeah, and I think because pointing out a sign and an arrow and or having to tell every customer, please go to that area, you can walk back there. That's almost it's almost an accident. We want people back there, so we're just going to hope that they figure it out.
Yeah,
and having an arrow that says, flashing lights, like walk here, that doesn't fit with your company's vision. I'm sure someone would get a kick out of that, but that doesn't sit with the company's vision. And so instead of just hoping that people see it, you made it happen.
Absolutely.
And I think that's an opportunity. We're in the food market right now. We're talking about the food market right now. But I think all of this is translatable to all of specialty retail of, your customers can't read your mind. And so you have to be very intentional with how you lay out your store. And so let's just transition to translating some of this to, let's say, a bike store, a running store. How do you decide, or what do you think are some of the opportunities for growth as the specialty retail market is kind of evolving and getting different legs under its feet?
I mean, I think that if you view something like a product mix or a sales mix, and you've seen that certain products are more keen to be sold than others, I think that as you organize your shop and consider where you place products, I think that that's a really great way to take advantage of what the trends are at the moment. I mean, if there's a certain brand that people are really, really focused on right now, or if there's a sale or anything like that, I think that that's kind of step one, and that's a pretty obvious one. But even the way that you flow through the store, I mean, you don't put the bike parts in front of the bike. You put the bike first, and then you talk about upgrading the shocks or maybe the wheels as you kind of progress down the line. It's all those upsales, all those opportunities to kind of up the tab and up the experience for the customer. I mean, we talked last time briefly about camping equipment. You don't want to send somebody out without the right gear. So, I mean, don't put the water bottle at the beginning, put it at the end, because these are the things that you tack on. Everybody thinks about the tent and the boots and the bag, but you don't think about the little things that could be key to the purchase or to the sale or to the customer.
The fire starter or
Absolutely.
the knife sharpener or the like small things that you never.
Sure.
And that's where the expertise of the person sitting behind the counter comes in, and that's the opportunity for them. Instead of just guessing that the customer knows about a fire starter or a hand can opener or like any of those small little knickknacks, it's your job to figure that out. Your
Absolutely.
job to ask the right questions, to glean, all right, how much does this person know about camping? Or how much does this person know about meat?
Sure, and I think that comes down to a really well-trained, well-compensated sales employee, because a minimum wage job is to take a product from a customer, ring it up, and accept a payment and send them on their way.
Yep.
You start getting into describing the terroir of a wine or the particular circumference of the wheels on a bike or the benefits of this shoe over that one. That's a skilled job. That's a career option. That's made for someone who A, cares about the product and the business, but B, really wants to set this customer service experience and take it to the next level for the customer.
Yeah.
Because that's how you get a return. If you send someone away, like we said, without a fire starter, they're going to come. They're probably not going to come back to your shop.
Probably not. Yeah. Or they're they're going to get lost in the woods, and you're going to see them on the news.
Sure.
Because they're missing.
Yeah.
Well, that leads to an interesting dynamic that I wanted to touch on in your particular job, the chop shop. You constantly have people older than you, and the original dynamic we had you on the podcast for is that you are a younger, you're not even a millennial. Are you the one before millennial?
I'm just 20 years old, so I believe that makes me Gen X.
Gen X, something like that.
Title that I've been given.
Yeah, who knows? Like, titles are meaningless, but it's still interesting. And so you have a lot of these people who are older than you, and you have been working at the shop now for a while, and you're probably a tenured employee or a seasoned employee. So what's the dynamic like for you having to train people that are older than you, or let's say give feedback even to someone, your owner, who's right next to you, and you have to give them feedback?
Sure.
So what, because the dynamic we're always cultivating is an environment of constant feedback. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're paying me. I want the shop to get better, so I'm going to give you some feedback.
Absolutely. And I think that positive and negative feedback is so essential to progressing as a business. But for me personally, in that particular instance, let's say that we hire someone on that's 10, 20 years older than me. First and foremost, I level the playing field. I don't even like to look at it as an age thing, because to me, the important thing's the customer at the end of the day, not necessarily my age. And so I kind of like to start with just a very broad overview of what we do and how we do it, because it is a very high demand, high expectation work environment just because of the nature of the business.
Yeah.
And I think that to look at something and to look at someone and to kind of neglect their opinion or to look down on them because of their age is ignorant in a way.
Yeah.
Truly, because you don't know what this person... I could have been reading books since I was 3 years old about customer service, and I could have been doing it for that long as well. You don't know. So to assume that I don't know as much as you is just wrong. And for me to assume that you don't know more than me is wrong.
Yeah.
So I like to level the playing field and kind of start as an equal.
Yeah.
And then we just train through things together. I think that, especially for me, a manager that won't do every single task on the ladder is maybe not the best manager. And don't get me wrong. As an owner of a business, you should not be cleaning the floor drains every day and scrubbing dirt off of bike wheels, but you better be able to do it. Yeah. You better be willing to do it. And I think that shows a lot, and I think that grants a lot of respect from your employees as well.
Yeah, well, and have a standard around it.
Absolutely.
So it's like you may not be the one doing it every day, but you're watching every day. How's that drain doing? How's that, is the bathroom clean? Whatever. And if you don't have your eye on it, and if it's not up to your standard, you better be doing something about it.
Absolutely.
So that's a good point. So with that dynamic of giving someone, well, because like you said, like stereotyping or discrimination against even something as simple as age is never appropriate. Stereotype and discriminating is in the workplace especially is never appropriate. And so, but from a practical standpoint, there are people who have an ego. There are people who can't humble themselves down to get feedback from anybody, let alone someone 20 years younger than them. So what are some practical tips? I know you mentioned leveling the playing field, but should you just have an air of confidence? Is your feedback more direct? Is it, do you have to apologize for giving feedback? How do you direct the conversation? Is it any different than you direct someone your own age or younger than you?
I think that it depends on person to person. Like we said, we always deal with people that may have an ego or issues with receiving feedback. But I think that if you keep it the same across the board, whether I'm talking to the owner or towards the first person or to the most recent person the guy hired a week ago, I think that it kind of makes it a little easier, because if they see that I'm speaking to someone a different way than I'm speaking to them, they might find that a little disrespectful. So it's always just with an air of the intention is for the customer. I'm never saying you're doing this wrong and that you're bad for it. It's, hey, let's do it this way, and kind of approach this problem together. And it's always, I always try to include someone. And I'm like, hey, let's take a look at this together. You placed this in the wrong area. This product is no longer available for sale because you dropped it. Let's talk about how to address this together and what we're going to do the next time.
Right. Okay. So, because when we talk about ego and giving someone feedback to improve the company, some people don't want to improve. Like let's talk about like a minimum wage job is somewhere where, I want to clock in, I want to clock out, I want to get my paycheck, and I want to go home, and I want to not think about this anymore.
Sure, and I think there should be stiff standards around those kind of circumstances and that mentality, because that's essentially what they want to be, is a robot.
Yeah, and so with that, with the specialty retail market, and in particular yours, it's specialty and it's local and it's a one shop, and it's, you've got a lot of uniqueness around, and you're in the food service, and you sell basically one product, meat, for the most part. So how do you don't have to go too specific, but like, how do you incentivize that employee without breaking the owner's bank? How do you deal with an increasingly high payroll percentage while still, incentivizing your people to do the right job?
I mean, I think that actually comes from them themselves, and that's a really big issue we have hiring at the shop right now. Finding the right person for the job. It honestly takes someone with the mentality that I want to help the customer. I want to make sure that every time they're in the shop, it's the best time.
Right.
And that's 50% of the incentive outside of payroll is the will and the want to do it.
Yeah. So from a practical standpoint, are there incentives for selling more items per transaction? Like, because when we talk about like a bike store, it's like you got the bike, but did you also sell socks, and did you also sell a helmet, and did you also sell, parts or whatever? So how do you incentivize people to sell more revenue?
I mean, I think that it's like any tipped employee, because we do now accept tips. Just as we started doing the menu, it's just a kind of a customary function. I think that they are beginning to see that the more effort they give a customer, the more, let me walk you to your car. How about a bottle of wine? How was dinner last week? I remember you bought that ribeye. How'd you cook it?
Yeah.
I think that personalizing it and really involving the customer is a great way to kind of increase your tip and to get, to incentivize it for yourself. We have a few programs instilled at the shop, one of which is something that we do within the employees themselves. It's kind of a box, and you write someone's name down and what they did if they went kind of above and beyond. And at the end of the month, that person with the most names in the box gets $100.
Wow.
And that's just a great way to kind of keep it in the back of their mind. Like maybe they're having a bad day at work and they're not really feeling the need or the want to make every experience great. But with that incentive kind of looming in the back of their mind, they might kind of go the extra mile with the hopes that they'll make the cut, so to say.
Yeah.
And get that little prize out of that box.
Do you think that doing something like a commission-based structure would be useful for your environment?
I don't, just because if one customer's in the shop and they're a very high-need customer, let's say they have, a large order and they want something custom cut and they also want a hand to the car, it can take our entire staff to help this one person.
Right.
And so it's really difficult to base a commission structure around it, because it might turn into a feud. Oh, you got commission for this, but I cut their bacon, and Matt in the back did this for them, and it makes it difficult. It's something that we've explored, especially around holidays when people are buying larger ticket items, but it cuts into our margins that are already so small, and so it's something that we considered, but it's impractical at this shop with this business model, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it would be different too with something like you had owners on the floor and then maybe like one or two people who constantly were working, as opposed to having a big rotating staff. Because, I've been in there on a busy day and you guys have 4 or 5 people back there constantly doing everything. Mm-hmm. But if it was just, like 1 or 2 people who were splitting a commission or splitting the sales or the square footage of the store, that could get pretty dynamic, and people could start making a lot of money if they were on it, because we did a series on compensation in the specialty retail.
Yeah.
And your guys have a very small store, and so I could see that tearing into the environment of the shop, potentially at the consumer's risk. But it is, getting the right people, not getting the people who are going to upsell underhandedly or
Sure. I mean, I think that to just sell for ticket price in our business, and this is, business by business and model by model, just to upsell for a number is to me an incorrect way to handle a customer in our environment. To tell them that this is what they want when you know that something else is what they need is really an incorrect way to go about it, just because, again, the customer experience is what gets a return customer and therefore drives your business and your revenue. If you sell someone something that's 3 times the cost of what they actually need, they're probably not going to come back because it wasn't what they needed. You just wanted to look like you sold more to one person. And I think that's a really bad way to handle it.
Well, that's because we were talking about the price question with a customer, asking. So let me give you an example, or I'll tell an example to our audience here where I think it was last week or the week before that I went into the chop shop and you were there, and I was talking about, getting a certain type of steak, and you told me about was it the chuck steak or something?
The chuck eye steak.
The chuck eye steak, which is similar to a
ribeye.
Ribeye. It's on the same muscle.
Absolutely.
But it's a little cheaper or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the same kind of material. So you could almost undersell me.
Sure.
Not upsell me, but like undersell me based on price, because that was a stipulation I had. It's like, I just want something for really quick for tonight's dinner, and here's my my selling points on it.
Absolutely. And my view on that, and something that I'm very keen on with my coworkers, and I always kind of push for, is there's that classic example of the butcher's thumb on top of the scale trying to falsely upsell someone.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, our thumb's under the scale.
Yeah.
We'll have someone that'll come in and buy something like a brisket and say, oh my goodness, that's way too much fat.
Right.
I don't want to pay for that.
Right.
Will you cut it off? And I said, ma'am, I'm more than happy to cut this off for you, but I will tell you that it's going to harsh the cooking experience.
Right.
Tell you what, I estimate I'm going to take off about 1.5 pounds of fat. What if I made it weigh 1.5 pounds less, and you paid for 1.5 pounds less? And I'm doing that, and I'm cutting into, let's say, the owner's profit and to the revenue, but I know that her experience is going to be much better that way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just something that comes with experience and knowing A, your customer, and B, your product.
Yeah.
But I think that an undersell can be a really great way to keep a customer, especially if price is something that is inhibiting them from shopping with you.
Definitely.
Especially that first time. If they come in and they say, wow, all your bikes are way too expensive for me, like there's no way that I could ever afford this, yada, yada, yada. If you find a different product, maybe a pair of shoes or something that you can at least sell them on and maybe cut them a deal and make them feel like it's a personal experience, they're more likely to come back with you and say, you know what, I'll spend the extra $300 just because of this service experience and it made me feel welcome, and it made me feel like this is a really great shop that I want to be a part of. And it can make them come back. Or you could lose your money, and that's just an investment risk that you have to take as a sales representative, and that's got to be, again, business by business. But that's something I'm very keen on.
It's the like 10 people that person told.
Absolutely.
That's the stuff. That's the you lost like $10 here, but you have no idea of the tendrils that spread out, because you have no idea how much that meant to someone, or how many people they told, or whatever. And so, where that came from is I was working with a bike store last week in Baltimore, and we were just kind of, brainstorming. Do you ask, because every company we work with is different, has a different culture. So we were asking, do you ask that price question right when someone walks in the door? You say, hi, how are you? How much are you looking to spend today? And so we went back and forth. There were reasons for it. There were reasons for against it. But at the same time, like, I think the consensus we have in our company and the consensus we came down to was that if you do your job correctly by asking great questions, you then become better at it's a better question. You can ask a better question than how much are you looking to spend. And you can get there without ever having to ask someone or potentially offend someone by asking how much they're looking to spend.
I can tell someone what they want for dinner based on whether or not they're cooking inside or outside, how many people they're feeding, even their interest. Do they value flavor over texture? Right. Do they want something that's going to fall apart in their mouth?
Yeah.
And this is a literal dichotomous key that each one of our customer service representatives has stored in their brain. It's a way to work from this person walking into the door down to almost to the price question, again, without ever having to ask them. And I, with lots of practice, have gotten to the point where I feel very comfortable doing this.
Yep.
It's almost reading your customer. And we talked briefly about this last time. It's definitely not a stereotype, because, the guy that pulls up in the Porsche, to label that person as a big spender is maybe a fallacy because you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, and it's thinking you've done your job and you haven't even come close to it.
And I haven't done my steps yet, and I haven't asked the proper questions like we talk about. And I think that is such a wonderful way to avoid the price question. And I think that, again, for the customer, it feels like such a better experience because you're essentially guiding them to a product.
Yeah.
And that's your job. I mean, as a higher-end specialty retail employee, I think that is a wonderful technique.
Yeah, exactly. Like certain questions like how do you, what kind of steak do you like to eat? What was the best steak you ever had in your life? Or how are you planning on cooking this? All of these questions, if you know what answer you're looking for or where it can go in your head, it's like a little, green light, red light. You got to play this game. Okay, where are we going? And then that helps you because the low level employees will just ask, how much money did you bring with you to spend today?
Right.
But that's just lazy. If you are really good at this soft skill of asking those great questions, building that trust between this person, then you said that you were looking for this. You said you were looking for a fatty steak that kind of is similar to a filet because you like fillets. Okay, here's my recommendation for you.
Absolutely. And it's just a suggestion, and sometimes people don't buy it. But either way, I feel like you've included them to the point where it's a heightened customer service experience.
Yeah, and like you said, you've included them by saying, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. We have a lot of products here, and so let's get you down to the right product.
I'm essentially making the decision for the customer, but they still feel as though they've done all of the thinking and they've made their choice, which people love to do that.
Yeah. And some people are going to walk in and say, and some days I'll be like this, I'm looking for this, and this, and bring it out to me, and I don't need anything else. And then other people are like, I have no idea I'm looking for. I've never even cooked a steak before.
Sure.
And so that you have to be able to deal with that too.
Yeah.
And so you have to gauge the customer that wants a recommendation versus people who don't want a recommendation.
And that's those soft skills that we talked about. And even if someone were to come in and say, this is what I want, give it to me, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I still engage them.
Yeah.
Tell me about your day.
Yeah.
What'd you cook last week? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
How are you cooking this tonight?
Yeah.
I think that any way that you can engage a customer and get them to talk to you and make the experience personal is a great way to get them to come back. I mean, I'm very keen on this when we train people. It's, how much can you talk to this person?
Yeah.
And especially, so something that's very important to me, a first-time customer coming into the shop I often will try to tag that customer. I will pass maybe, transition from the customer I'm on to this first-time customer, and I'll wow them. We call it rockstarring a guest.
Yeah.
Just because that first experience is going to last with them for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
And they may never shop with us again, but it's those 10 people that they told about the shop that's so important. And so I will give them 200% attention.
Yeah.
If they're a first-time guest. That's something that we are adamant about.
Yeah, they'll walk out and just be like, what just happened?
Absolutely.
I don't even understand what just happened, but I like it. And that is the wow factor.
Sure. I think that's how we beat big box. I mean, I think that's, as Amazon starts to carry these things, in my sense, in my world, as they start to carry these products that can be delivered to your door, dry iced and frozen within 48 hours, I think that's how we win. I mean, I think that's how we hold on to these customers, is just to absolutely wow them with customer service.
Yeah, and the selling point, in Asheville, it's everywhere, but, I'm sure everywhere it's values it to a different degree, but in Asheville, it's a big deal of shopping local versus
goodness.
Because like you can find like, you can go to like a Whole Foods or whatever and find like, I'm doing air quotes here, but grass-fed meat, but it's from Australia or it's from wherever. And so you've got the like, the buzzword grass-fed or whatever, but it's not as high quality. It's been frozen and it's like you have no idea where it's from, a different country.
Sure.
And so there's like an element there that you can capitalize on, and you have capitalized on in the Asheville market, because it's the grass-fed, corn-finished, and then local as well. Here are the farms we buy our meat from. We visited this farm. We saw this cow. We saw,
Right, absolutely. I mean, and as we look to expand the business and potentially open more shops, our biggest hiccup and our biggest headache is this world that Asheville is. It's its own entity. I mean, locality is so important to this community, and that's something that we're so adamant about here.
Yeah.
And as we look, I mean, even towards Charlotte, which is not that far away, the culture is just different.
It is.
So do we speak on the same things? Do we carry our values from shop to shop, our ethics, our morals?
Yep.
Or do we try to reinvent and carry the same products, but maybe speak to a different audience
right.
as we move around? And that's something that we have to consider, that maybe some businesses might not have to, just be depending on the nature of the product or the area that they're in.
I mean, think about if you just uprooted your entire shop, all of your employees, everything was exactly the same, and just moved it to Charlotte, you would probably not see the same success. You'd have to do something different.
Absolutely.
Just off the criteria of your customers and the dynamic that you guys have.
I mean, I think it just, again, evaluate your customer. What do they care about? And I'm not saying that anyone in Charlotte doesn't care about locality. I just think that the populace is different.
Yeah.
I think that we speak to a different audience there.
Yep.
You know, it's a larger foodie scene. People may be more interested in flavor and in, you know, how things cook versus the story behind it. And again, it's customer to customer and it's area to area. But like as we look around to move, that's something that really we have to play in our minds and take into consideration.
Yeah, and along that same vein is the what do you offer to the community? Because like in Charlotte, it could be, you know, we take flavor very seriously and we take upscale the finished product. Like, how does this turn out? The presentation of it, does it look pretty? Is it on white plates? Mm-hmm. And that kind of upscale more scene, because Charlotte does have a very nice upscale food scene, whereas Asheville is all about the ingredients. You know, Is it local? Is it eclectic? Is it organic? Is it locally farmed? Did you get it at a farmer's market? Like it could be a $50, you know, like steak dinner that you get at a restaurant, but that would still not be as good as like something from the farmer's market.
Right.
You know, because from the farmer's market, it's like, oh, I'm supporting local business, and you know, and so it's a whole dynamic.
Absolutely, and I think that, you know, a lot of our customers opt to shop even if they have to spend a little bit more at a local business, which is wonderful. And I do the same thing as well. Everything from haircuts to ramps or onions that we buy at the farmer's market. I always, if I can, opt to shop local just to kind of further this snowball that Asheville is. I mean, everyone kind of helps everyone out. I'm a part of several groups around town. You know, there's the Charlotte Street Business Association, there's Asheville Independent Restaurant Groups, and these are wonderful organizations that tie businesses together and kind of support each other. There are things like living wage that has been implemented through some of these groups. So if you're a part of this restaurant group, you agree to pay your customers what they consider, your employees what they consider living wage in Asheville, which is $13.65.
Yeah.
Which is often $2 or $3 higher than what most businesses would pay for the same positions.
Yep.
But it's an agreement. I mean, your customers, your employees are the most important part of your business. That's what generates your revenue. So if they're well compensated, the idea is that they'll be healthier and they'll, you know, be able to provide a better experience.
And that is actually selling points for this area.
Absolutely.
You know, and so it's the opportunity out of this segment that we're talking about here is to understand not only your employees and your business and your area, but also the customer, like what's important to them. Is it important that they spend money with someone who who compensates their employees fairly? Is it important that, you know, here's a selling point, we donate, you know, 5% of our profits every Friday to the local boys club or whatever, you know, like,
absolutely.
And that's a selling point for people. And so that's, you know, in one of our sales training processes that we sell is gear. And it's just that offering new information that you may not know about us. Hey, so we are certified with these organizations to be a fair living wage. And we also donate this money and we support local farmers here, and we, you know, X, Y, or Z. And you have that new information queued up. Hey, you know, I understand that our shop may be a little pricey for you, but you know, we do some great things for the community.
Absolutely, and again, identify what the customer values.
Yep.
And that becomes again another selling point.
And if none, go ahead.
I just think it's a wonderful way to include more of the community, because you have people that would opt to just continue to shop at Harris Teeter or Whole Foods, but if they feel like they're a part of the process, if they feel like they're a part of this, you know, let's call it a green movement, or at least something that benefits whatever it is that they value, they'll be more keen to shop with you. Yeah.
And if that doesn't matter to that customer, then they probably weren't your kind of customer anyway.
Absolutely.
You know, if they don't see the vision or the appeal to that, you know, we don't hate you. You know, enjoy shopping where you feel a little more comfortable. But this is something that we value, and we're not going to compromise on.
Let us know if we can ever do anything for you.
We're not going to compromise on the way, you know, we're not going to compromise on how we compensate our employees. We're not going to compromise on our quality of product. And so, because of that, here are our prices, and either you see the value or you don't.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think we hit this one hard, Uriah. That was a good little segment. But before you go, I wanted to ask, what kind of music are you into these days? Are you a music listener?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time at the Orange Peel here in Asheville listening to every little group and and sound that I can, so to say. The most prevalent artist, if I just had to throw one out there, there's a gentleman, country singer, actually, Tyler Childers. He's blowing up around the world right now, and I'm looking forward to seeing him soon.
Yeah.
But probably one of my favorite artists at the moment. How about you?
Well, actually, I've been listening to a lot of actually a little more country music than I realized. A lot of bluegrass. I've recycled. I was a big Fleet Foxes fan growing up, and I've recently recycled some of their older albums into my regular like shuffle. And I'm like, wow, I forgot how good this was. It's weird when you listen to a song when you're younger and you're like, I get what they're doing here, but you listen to it for a little bit. And then when you grow older, you start to appreciate it a little bit more. And Fleet Fox is one of those bands that I just have grown to appreciate.
Sure, it can take you back in time as well. Different songs. Yeah.
Exactly. Are you a Game of Thrones fan?
I shamefully no. I never got the chance to start it, and I feel like I'm a few months behind in watching time. So
well, it's coming up, so I'm sure I'm sure any listeners here at the end of the podcast club are like, oh yeah, let's talk about Game of Thrones. We should turn this into a Game of Thrones podcast. Well, all right, cool. Well, last question. Are there any books out there that you would recommend or that you're reading right now and you're really into, or any books recently that surprised you?
I hate to be kind of a one-trick pony, but my mind and my mentality focus always on food, and there's a book by Michael Pollan called The Omnivore's Dilemma that discusses a few things, what organic truly means, what cage-free truly means.
Yeah.
And it's really important to me. It talks about the value of corn in America and how it goes from being the cheeseburger on the plate at McDonald's to the styrofoam, the plastics, the corn syrup, the French fries. It's really, really interesting to me.
Wow.
It's a great book. Give it a read.
How long is it?
Probably 300-400 pages.
Okay, and it's like it's written in each segment leads to a point, or are they kind of guiding along the same?
It discusses a few things. I mean, one of the chapters again discusses organic and what that really means, because for so long it's been such a nice selling point.
For sure.
But if you visited a true organic, large-scale production farm that might be selling to Whole Foods or somewhere that really values it, I think you'd be pretty shocked.
Yeah.
And then somewhere that is a true organic, let's call it, where nature is the key driver, wouldn't even be organic certified because they didn't pay the government to come and approve this location. And it's just an interesting way to look at the world. You say cage free, you're like, wow, that chicken ran around. Maybe not. Maybe you should go read about it.
Yeah, the cage free, free range and organic,
they mean
pastured.
Very things.
And so that is interesting to me. I know I find I'm a huge nutrition junkie, so I get swept along the different paths. That it's been interesting, like 8 to 9 year journey of figuring out, all right, what does all this mean, and how does it fit into how I'm going to live my life?
Absolutely,
because it's a big deal for sure. Not to try and wrap a bow on this, but it is with any local shop. Each one has their own story. That, all right, how am I going to fit this local bike store, this local grocery store, into my everyday life?
Sure.
Am I willing to go out of the way to shop here? Am I willing to make this my place I take my bike every time, or this is the place I get my running shoes every time I need running shoes? So I did wrap a tight bow on that. So you're welcome for that.
Thank you.
Well, Uriah, it's always fun to have you on the podcast, and based on popular demand, we may have you for a third one.
I'd appreciate that a lot. I always enjoy coming out and talking, and I have a great time.
Of course, man. Well, appreciate your time, and thanks for everyone who made it this far in the podcast. Talk to you soon on Mandatory Listening. That's it for this episode. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on our iTunes channel. We'll see you next week.